Marrying a human for peace backfired when he revealed power no alien HFY stories. Best HFY stories. The first rays of Zyphra's twin suns stretched across the crystalline towers of the Virelian capital, painting the city in shades of gold and silver. Captain Elias Kane stood at the edge of his chamber balcony, observing the alien city below. Every tower, every bridge, every street seemed deliberately designed to impress and intimidate. It was beautiful, but it was also a reminder that he was far from home, surrounded by beings who considered humans unpredictable and weak. Elias, however, had learned long ago not to be underestimated. Humans had survived countless dangers, adapted to environments no one else could endure, and thrived where others failed. Today would test whether those skills could withstand an alien court that believed diplomacy meant control, not collaboration. He dressed simply, as he always did. A lightweight tunic, sturdy boots, and a few small tools tucked into a belt. The Virelians dressed in flowing robes that changed color with their emotions, signaling rank, mood, or intent. Elia's plain clothing made him stand out, not in elegance but in quiet confidence. It was a subtle message. He did not need to display power to command attention. Lord Xylan, his Virelian spouse, appeared silently beside him. His towering form radiated authority, the kind of presence that could silence a room without effort. "The council is ready," Xylan said. His voice was smooth, precise, carrying the weight of expectation. "They wish to begin the formal ceremonies. You understand what this marriage represents?" "Yes," Elias nodded. "I understand. It is meant to secure peace, and it will in its own way." His words were simple, but his tone hinted at the awareness that humans were rarely predictable. The ceremony took place in the Hall of Light, a vast chamber where walls shimmered with energy that responded to the emotions of those present. Virelian nobles filled the room, all radiating subtle waves of energy meant to communicate status and intent. Elias moved among them, observing. Each noble assumed he was fragile, a mere figurehead to legitimize their political plans. They did not see the human mind at work, quietly analyzing, observing, and predicting. The vows were pronounced, words heavy with tradition and the promise of peace. Elias spoke them clearly, his tone steady, projecting confidence. Xylan responded with the formal phrases of his culture, though Elias noticed a faint flicker of surprise in his alien spouse's eyes. The Virelians expected compliance, perhaps even timidity. Elias' calm, assured presence was already unsettling. After the ceremony, the nobles escorted the couple through a series of tests designed to showcase their suitability as leaders and partners. The first trial was the Court of Balance, where participants were expected to demonstrate control over energy currents that flowed through the hall. Humans had never attempted this before, most failed within seconds. Elias stepped forward deliberately, observing the currents, noting the rhythm and the subtle shifts in power. At first, he moved cautiously, letting the energy wash over him, adapting to its patterns. Unlike the Virelians, humans did not have innate energy manipulation, but they had ingenuity and adaptability. Elias began to step and shift with precision, learning to redirect currents with subtle gestures, not strength. The nobles murmured in surprise. The human was not only surviving the test, but subtly influencing it, bending the currents into patterns no Virelian had anticipated. Lord Xylan watched closely, his expression unreadable. "Interesting," he said softly. Elias only smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of someone who understood his own capabilities. Next was the trial of coordination, a test of teamwork and understanding. Humans were expected to fail, to disrupt the flow of their Virelian counterparts. Elias paired with Xylan, moving in tandem with careful observation. Where Virelians relied on instinct and energy harmonics, Elias relied on calculation and anticipation. Each step, each gesture was measured yet fluid. Together, they created a rhythm that complemented both their strengths and weaknesses. The nobles leaned forward, astonished. This human, whom they expected to falter, had adapted seamlessly to an alien form of communication and control. During the trial, small acts of ingenuity began to surface. Elias noticed a minor misalignment in the energy flows and redirected it with a subtle hand gesture, something a Virelian would have considered unnecessary. The ripple effect stabilized the entire system. Xylan's eyes widened slightly. The human was not just surviving, he was improving the process. After the formal trials, the couple was escorted to the observation gardens, a sprawling area filled with alien flora that glowed softly in response to energy fluctuations. It was meant to impress and intimidate, but Elias approached it as he would any unknown environment, carefully observing patterns, noting behaviors. Some plants reacted aggressively to proximity, releasing sharp bursts of light or sound. Others were passive, almost playful. Elias navigated the garden with quiet grace, adapting to each challenge and learning from it. Xylan followed, impressed in a way he rarely admitted. "You move differently than I expected," he said. "Humans are unpredictable," Elias nodded. "Unpredictable is how we survive. We notice what others overlook, adapt to what others fear, and find solutions where others see only obstacles." That evening, a banquet was held in their honor. Aliens of varying ranks attended, each radiating energy that conveyed pride, suspicion, or curiosity. Elias sat calmly, observing, learning. Humans were often underestimated in gatherings like these. Their value was measured not by immediate strength, but by adaptability and insight. As the evening progressed, Elias began to subtly influence conversations, redirecting misunderstandings, clarifying intentions, and creating subtle alliances without overtly showing dominance. Lord Xylan watched closely, a flicker of respect crossing his features. Humans were not supposed to be capable of such subtle influence, yet Elias had already begun reshaping the perceptions of everyone in the room. After the banquet, as the city below glimmered in the light of Zyphera's twin moons, Elias and Xylan walked along the palace terraces. The night was calm, and the air carried the faint hum of energy that flowed through the city. Elias felt no fear, only awareness. He understood that diplomacy with the Virelians required more than words. It required observation, patience, and strategic influence. "They do not understand you," Xylan said quietly, breaking the silence. "Most expect a human to be easily guided. You are different." Elias smiled faintly. "We survive by being different, by noticing, adapting, and acting when others are constrained by their assumptions. That is how humans thrive." Xylan's gaze lingered on him, a mixture of intrigue and cautious admiration. "You will change much more than the council expects, perhaps even more than you realize." Elias glanced over the city, considering the long path ahead. The marriage, intended to secure peace, had already begun to unfold in ways the Virelians did not anticipate. They had assumed he would be a tool, a symbol, or a figurehead. Instead, he had subtly shown them that humans were resourceful, adaptable, and quietly powerful in ways they could not yet measure. The first night ended with the sense that something fundamental had shifted. The Virelians had expected control. Instead, they encountered ingenuity. They had expected compliance. Instead, they were faced with confidence and intelligence. Elias understood that the path ahead would be filled with trials, each designed to test his limits, but he also knew that humanity had never thrived by following expectations. As he prepared for sleep, Elias reflected on the day. Every test, every ceremony, every glance from a noble was a reminder that humans were underestimated across the galaxy. Yet in that underestimation lay opportunity. Observation, understanding, and adaptability were not just survival skills, they were power. And Elias Kane, standing on an alien world married for diplomacy, had already begun to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. When he finally lay down, the twin moons casting a soft glow through the crystalline windows, Elias felt calm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and perhaps new surprises. But he was ready. Humans survived because they adapted. They thrived because they understood. And in doing so, they reshaped every world they touched. The first day of the Virelian alliance had ended, but the story of human ingenuity and unexpected strength had only just begun. The morning sun filtered through the high, crystalline windows of the Virelian palace, scattering light across the polished floors in patterns like flowing rivers. Captain Elias Kane rose from the soft human-style bed, his mind already working, analyzing every detail of the palace around him. Each corridor, each chamber, every object seemed deliberately designed to overwhelm or impress, a quiet display of Virelian mastery over their environment. Elias, however, had learned early not to be distracted by appearances. Humans had long survived by noticing small details that others overlooked. He dressed quickly, choosing simple clothing that allowed freedom of movement. The Virelians found his plain attire strange, even audacious. Most of them wore flowing garments that shifted colors with their moods or social rank. Elia's simplicity, he realized, was itself a subtle demonstration of control. By refusing to be swayed by fashion or status, he remained untouchable in a small but meaningful way. Breakfast in the palace was a formal affair, though unlike human meals, it was more ritual than nourishment. Plates of translucent food hovered above tables through magnetic fields, and the guests consumed nutrients directly from the light-infused dishes. Elias accepted the meal politely, observing the gathered Virelian nobles. Lord Xylan, his new spouse by Virelian law, sat at the head of the table, exuding an air of calm authority. Every movement, every glance was calculated. Yet Elias noticed a flicker of doubt behind Xylan's composed mask. "You slept well?" Xylan asked, in a voice smooth as polished stone. Elias inclined his head slightly. "As well as one can, surrounded by perfection." His tone was neutral, almost teasing, though the Virelians might not have understood humor in its human form. Xylan's eyes narrowed fractionally, the smallest acknowledgement that Elia's words had landed. The day's first challenge came shortly after breakfast. The Virelians had arranged what they called the Rite of Harmony, a series of exercises designed to measure loyalty, skill, and energy alignment between spouses. Humans had never participated before, and the nobles expected Elias to fail spectacularly. It was not unusual for Virelians to view humans as fragile, adaptable only in limited ways. That assumption had been consistent in their encounters, until Elias cane. The courtyard was vast, framed by towers that stretched toward the sky like frozen waterfalls. Light beams crisscrossed in patterns that responded to the energy of those who walked beneath them. The first exercise was simple to the Virelians: synchronize movements with a partner to maintain energy balance within the courtyard grid. The human was expected to falter, unable to match the subtle energy flows that were second nature to the aliens. Elias took his place beside Xylan. At first, he allowed himself to seem cautious, observing rather than acting. The grid pulsed, responding to the Virelian movements with seamless precision. Then, as the nobles watched, Elias began to move. Not to mimic, not to follow, but to adapt. His human muscles reacted with small adjustments, reading the energy pulses like notes in a melody. The movement was imperfect by Virelian standards, yet it harmonized in unexpected ways. The energy beams flickered, swayed, and then settled into a new rhythm, one that had never existed before. The assembled nobles gasped. Such innovation within the trial was unheard of. Humans were never supposed to influence the grid. Elia's face remained calm, neutral, but inside, a small thrill surged. For the first time, he had shown that humans were more than their physical limitations. Lord Xylan's eyes widened, but only slightly. "Interesting," he murmured. There was a hint of admiration buried under the carefully measured tone. The next exercise was more physically demanding. Humans were expected to fail outright. The nobles brought forth hovering platforms, each generating a weak anti-gravity field. The task was to move from one platform to another while maintaining balance and alignment with energy pulses that shifted unpredictably. For the Virelians, it was child's play. For a human, it would be nearly impossible. Elias studied the shifting pulses for a brief moment. Unlike the Virelians, humans relied not on energy manipulation alone, but on observation, prediction, and instinct. He timed his steps, adjusted his weight, and allowed momentum to guide him. When he landed on the final platform, perfectly balanced, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some nobles blinked, unsure if their eyes deceived them. A human, an ordinary human by their standards, had completed the challenge flawlessly. Even Xylan could not hide a flicker of surprise. "You adapt quickly," he said. Elias only smiled faintly. "We survive by adapting." His words were simple, yet layered with meaning. Humans had been underestimated across the galaxy for centuries. That they thrived in adversity was not a trick, it was their nature. The final test was less public but no less critical. It involved the energy labyrinth, a chamber where one's ability to sense, manipulate, and redirect energy was examined. For the Virelians, this was the ultimate test. Humans had no inherent energy connection like theirs, or so the nobles believed. Elias entered the labyrinth alone, the entrance doors sealing behind him with a hiss. Inside, the chamber shifted constantly. Walls morphed, light beams redirected, and energy currents danced like living threads. Most Virelians could navigate by instinct, but Elias had no instinct for this kind of energy. What he had, however, was ingenuity. He moved deliberately, noting patterns, observing feedback. When an energy beam threatened to block his path, he redirected it with a carefully placed human-engineered device he had hidden on his person, a small, simple gadget of wires and lenses. It worked. The energy flowed in a new direction, opening a path forward. Hours seemed to pass in mere minutes. Finally, Elias reached the center of the labyrinth. A single pedestal awaited, glowing with soft light. On it lay a crystal of pure energy, humming with Virelian power. Humans had never touched such a crystal. And yet, Elias lifted it without a struggle, feeling its energy respond to his calm mind rather than his body. When he emerged, the courtyard was empty of the general assembly. Only Xylan waited. The pedestal's energy hummed faintly in Elias' hand. "You've done it," Xylan said softly, almost in disbelief. "Humans are stronger than we imagined." Elias inclined his head. "Not stronger, just different. We solve problems differently, that's all." For the first time, Xylan regarded him not as a political tool, but as a being worthy of genuine respect. The nobles would whisper of this moment for decades. Some would doubt, others would fear, but all would remember that humans were unpredictable in ways that could not be ignored. The rest of the day passed with more subtle demonstrations. Elias did not flaunt his abilities, but small acts. A clever rerouting of energy in the kitchens, a human strategy for organizing the palace guards, an unexpected solution to a malfunctioning energy conduit, continued to impress and unsettle the Virelians. By evening, as the twin moons of Zyphra rose and bathed the palace in silver light, Elias and Xylan walked together along the palace terraces. The city below glittered with alien luminescence, yet Elias' mind was already planning. Humans had survived centuries on Earth by being adaptable, resilient, and clever. Here, on an alien world, the same principles applied. "You are unusual," Xylan said. The words carried a weight of honesty that surprised both of them. Most humans would have been overwhelmed by the first test. You manage it all with calm, as if nothing matters. Elias glanced at him, a small smile playing on his lips. Calm matters more than strength. Humans survive by thinking, by noticing what others miss. You'll see in time that what looks like weakness is often our greatest advantage. Xylan did not respond immediately. The Virelian mind was trained to analyze, calculate, and judge, but this human had already overturned many of its assumptions. As the moons reflected off the crystalline spires of the city, Xylan realized that the marriage meant for diplomacy was changing into something far more profound. The Virelians had expected a puppet. They received a partner, unpredictable, clever, and undeniably powerful in ways they could barely comprehend. Elias' eyes swept over the city, then back to his alien spouse. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we learn more about each other and about what humans can do." And Xylan, for the first time, felt a mixture of apprehension and admiration. Peace, it seemed, would come at a cost, the cost of underestimating humanity. The next morning dawned cold and bright, with the twin suns of Zyphra glinting off the crystal towers like molten gold. Captain Elias Kane rose before the palace stirrings, alert and aware of the day ahead. The previous day had already stirred quiet whispers among the Virelian nobles. A human had completed every test, adapted every challenge, and shown an ingenuity that unsettled even the most confident of their kind. Elias knew that today would be harder. The Virelians would push him further, not out of malice, but to see the limits of human ability and perhaps to teach themselves a lesson about humility. He dressed in his simple tunic, the fabric light and flexible. Elias was aware that every movement he made was being observed, every glance studied. But humans had always thrived under observation. From the earliest settlements on Earth to distant colonies among the stars, being watched had taught them caution, patience, and creativity. Elias carried that knowledge quietly like a shield. Lord Xylan met him at the palace gates. His usual calm aura carried an undercurrent of tension today. "The council has arranged something for you," Xylan said, voice steady but firm. "They call it the trial of influence." "It is not a simple test," Elias nodded. "I have survived simple tests. I do not fear complex ones." His words carried calm, but his mind was already running calculations, examining possibilities, weaknesses, and opportunities. The trial of influence took place in the Grand Council Hall, a vast space filled with Virelian nobles seated on platforms of varying heights. At the center of the hall was the Convergence Sphere, a massive orb of shifting energy designed to simulate battlefield conditions. The Virelians believed control of the sphere was proof of superiority. Humans, lacking innate energy manipulation, were expected to fail. When Elias entered, the nobles whispered among themselves. They saw a human, slight in build compared to the towering Virelians, approaching the sphere. He carried no device, no apparent weapon. Only his mind and body would serve him. The sphere activated, filling the hall with blinding light. Energy streams shifted rapidly, forming barriers, walls, and channels. Each movement required perfect timing and precise control to navigate without disruption. Most humans would have been overwhelmed within seconds. Elias paused, observing. His eyes caught the rhythm of the energy, the subtle patterns the Virelians assumed were invisible. He took a step forward, then another. Each footfall and gesture redirected small streams of energy unintentionally, subtly influencing the sphere's flow. To the nobles, it looked as though the human was lucky, almost by accident. But Elias had calculated each movement, using principles of leverage, anticipation, and environmental manipulation. Minutes passed. The Virelians grew tense. The Convergence Sphere, designed to challenge even the most skilled of their kind, shifted unpredictably. Yet Elias moved with growing confidence, adjusting to each change, turning obstacles into pathways. One by one, the energy barriers aligned in ways that facilitated smooth passage. The humans seemed to bend the impossible into the achievable, not with brute force, but with ingenuity. By the time he reached the center of the sphere, the nobles were silent. Even Xylan's eyes widened slightly. Elias extended a hand toward the core energy, and the sphere's streams converged gently around him, responding to his calm focus. He had not destroyed it. He had not dominated it. He had integrated, solved it in a way that respected its complexity while asserting his presence. When he stepped back, the hall erupted in quiet murmurs. The Virelians were unaccustomed to seeing humans succeed where failure was expected. The council members exchanged looks, some skeptical, some intrigued. A human, they realized, did not fit into their simple categories of strength and weakness. Elias had changed that perception in a single, elegant demonstration. After the trial, Elias walked with Xylan through the palace gardens. The twin suns were now lower, casting long shadows across the crystalline flowers that glimmered in colors beyond human names. "You impressed them," Xylan said, "but they are not yet fully convinced." "They will push further," Elias smiled faintly. "Good pushing reveals limits. Knowing limits allows growth. Humans have always thrived when pushed. I do not fear their next test." That afternoon brought a different challenge. The council organized a simulation of a Virelian border conflict, involving hundreds of holographic units moving through a model city. Elias was given command over a group of human and Virelian volunteers. The task was simple in concept: defend the city, minimize losses, and secure key points. The nobles assumed the human would fail, that his strategies would be too simplistic or predictable. Elias studied the terrain carefully. Unlike the Virelians, humans did not rely solely on energy manipulation. Humans observed, adapted, and used creativity to turn disadvantages into opportunities. He positioned his forces not where strength was obvious, but where it would surprise the enemy. He assigned tasks based on individual strengths, improvising solutions where resources were limited. When the simulation began, the Virelians watched eagerly. The human-led team moved with precision, anticipating attacks, redirecting energy streams, and exploiting weak points. Every move was calculated yet flexible. Unlike the rigid methods of the Virelians, Elias' strategy allowed adaptation at every step. When one line of defense faltered, he had already prepared an alternative, unseen by the observers. Hours passed, and by the end of the simulation, Elias' team had achieved victory with minimal loss. The nobles were stunned. Not only had the human succeeded, but he had outperformed many of their top commanders. Even Xylan's usual composure could not hide his admiration. "You lead differently," he said quietly. "Humans see patterns we ignore. You adapt, improvise, you think." Elias shrugged. "We survive by thinking. That is our advantage." That night, the palace was quiet except for the soft hum of energy flowing through the walls. Elias stood on the terrace, watching the city below. In the distance, patrols moved in precise patterns, unaware that the human who had joined their ranks was already thinking several steps ahead. His mind was not only on survival but on opportunity. Humans thrived not by dominating but by understanding. Xylan approached, stepping lightly onto the terrace. "The council will call another trial tomorrow," he said. "Something personal. They wish to understand you fully." Elias glanced at him, curiosity in his gaze. "I am ready. Whatever they plan, I can handle it." Xylan paused, watching the human. "You do not fear them. Most Violians would hesitate. You are unlike any being we have encountered." Elias smiled faintly. "Fear slows you, understanding strengthens you. Humans have long survived because we understand, even when others underestimate us." The next day's trial was indeed personal. The council summoned Elias to a chamber filled with holographic projections of planets, fleets, and alien territories. The exercise was to plan a strategy that ensured the survival of both humans and Violians in a hypothetical interstellar conflict. The test was not about combat. It was about foresight, alliances, and negotiation. Elias studied the projections, noting patterns, vulnerabilities, and potential solutions. He proposed alliances, coordinated defense systems, and created contingency plans. Each proposal was grounded in logic, yet flexible enough to allow adaptation. The council members watched in silence, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. When he finished, a Violian elder spoke. "You think differently. You value life, strategy, and adaptation over mere power. Humans may indeed be our unexpected equals." Elias nodded. "We survive by adapting and respecting the resources we have. Strength alone does not win conflicts. Understanding, planning, and cooperation do." By evening, the whispers among the nobles had turned into quiet discussions. Humans were no longer seen as fragile or predictable. They were a force shaped by resilience, intelligence, and ingenuity. Even Xylan had begun to see the human not as a political tool, but as a partner with vision and strength in a form the Violians had never expected. Elias and Xylan walked the palace corridors as the sun set. The crystalline walls glowed faintly, reflecting their figures in a dance of light. "Tomorrow," Elias said, "we will see if they are ready to truly respect humans. Not because they fear us, but because they understand us." Xylan nodded, his expression unreadable yet thoughtful. "They will learn whether they wish to or not." And so the human continued to change the Violians' perception, not through force, not through rebellion, but through the quiet, undeniable power of ingenuity. Each challenge, each trial, each subtle act of intelligence added to a growing realization across Zyphera. Humans were not to be underestimated. For the first time in generations, the Violians began to understand that peace through marriage had brought more than diplomacy. It had brought a force capable of shaping their world, challenging assumptions, and showing that humanity's greatest weapon was not aggression, but ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience. And Elias Kane, standing tall amid the alien towers, understood that this was only the beginning. The palace was alive with quiet tension as dawn broke over Zyphera. Captain Elias Kane awoke early, senses alert, aware that today would be unlike any day before. The previous trials had revealed what the Violians had never fully expected. Humans were clever, adaptable, and fearless in ways that their own society struggled to comprehend. Now the council had planned the ultimate test, one that combined diplomacy, strategy, and leadership, a challenge meant to reveal whether humans could truly integrate with Violian power and influence. Elias dressed quickly, choosing his simple tunic and practical boots. His mind was already running through possible scenarios. The trial was as much about observation as it was action. Humans had survived the galaxy for countless generations because they could anticipate, adapt, and improvise. Elias had already proven that ingenuity could rival raw power. Today, he would show something even greater, humanity's capacity to unite and inspire. Lord Xylan met him at the terrace entrance. His usual composed demeanor was undercut by a flicker of anticipation. "The council has arranged a full-scale simulation," he said. "They wish to test your command, your decision-making, and your ability to inspire not only humans but Violians as well. It will not be easy." Elias nodded. "I have never been afraid of difficulty." Humans thrive when challenged. The council hall was enormous, more vast than any earthly cathedral, its walls shimmering with energy projections of cities, star systems, and fleets. The challenge was deceptively simple in description: defend the human and Virelian colonies from a simulated interstellar threat. But the complexity lay in the details. The simulations included multiple alien factions, shifting alliances, unpredictable attacks, and scenarios designed to confuse and overwhelm. Most participants, even elite Virelians, would falter under the pressure. Elias studied the projections, carefully noting the positions of each colony, the flow of energy defenses, and the simulated movement of enemy fleets. He saw patterns that were invisible at first glance: weak points, timing mismatches, and potential opportunities to turn disadvantage into advantage. Humans had survived for millennia not because they were stronger, but because they observed, learned, and adapted faster than anyone else. He began issuing instructions, calm and deliberate. Human volunteers worked alongside Virelians, some of whom still harbored doubts about the humans' abilities. Elias treated each participant according to their strengths. Where Virelians relied on raw energy projection, humans used strategy and anticipation. He integrated both approaches, creating a cohesive team where each contribution mattered, no matter how different it seemed. The simulation began. Holographic fleets moved across the projected star systems, and energy beams lit the council hall in cascading patterns of light. Virelian commanders hesitated at first, unsure how to act under Elias' unorthodox guidance. He directed human units to flank positions the Virelians had overlooked, set up coordinated defensive grids, and even anticipated attacks before they occurred. His strategies were not based on domination but on understanding and foresight. Hours passed. The holographic battles raged, yet Elias' calm focus never wavered. Whenever a problem arose, he adapted, adjusting strategies in real time, often turning what seemed like disaster into advantage. Human volunteers were inspired by his clarity, while the Virelians, many of whom had never encountered such leadership, began to follow his direction willingly. The council watched in stunned silence as a human, slight, unarmed, and seemingly ordinary, led a combined force of humans and Virelians to virtual victory. When the final wave of the simulation subsided, the hall was quiet. The council members were pale, their composure shaken. Lord Xylan approached Elias, his expression a mixture of admiration and amazement. "You have done what no human or Virelian alone could achieve," he said. "You have united us not through power but through understanding." Elias inclined his head. "Strength is not only in energy or weapons. Strength is in knowledge, in observation, and in the courage to act wisely. Humans have survived for centuries because we understand that cooperation and ingenuity often outweigh brute force." For the first time, the council could not find fault with the human. Instead, they saw clearly what the Virelians had long ignored. Humans were not fragile, weak, or predictable. They were a species capable of remarkable insight, creativity, and leadership. And Elias Kane, by embodying these qualities, had changed the way Virelians perceived the galaxy. As the day progressed, more discussions followed. Elias proposed reforms that would improve collaboration between human and Virelian settlements, suggesting shared energy networks, cooperative defense strategies, and systems for communication and trade. Each idea was met with cautious curiosity, then growing enthusiasm. The humans had not conquered by force. They had conquered by intellect and vision, showing that influence could be as powerful as power itself. That evening, as the twin moons rose over Zyphera, Elias and Xylan walked together along the palace terraces. Below, the city shimmered with life, its towers glowing with subtle energy patterns. Elias looked out over the world, reflecting on the journey so far. "They will never underestimate humans again," he said quietly. Xylan nodded. "No. And they will begin to see value in perspectives they once dismissed. You have changed more than the council or even the city. You have changed the way your species will be seen here for generations." Elias smiled faintly. "We survive because we adapt. And when we survive, we shape the future." The following days brought ceremonies and celebrations, but Elias' focus remained sharp. He continued to work with the council, offering guidance on trade, security, and diplomacy. Human innovations began to influence Virelian methods, from energy management to logistics. Slowly, the once rigid society began to recognize the value of collaboration, not merely hierarchy. One evening, during a quiet moment in the palace gardens, Xylan spoke again. "I underestimated humans," he admitted. "I assumed you would be controlled, guided, or even intimidated. I see now that your strength lies elsewhere. You inspire, you adapt, and you find solutions where others see only barriers." Elias regarded him calmly. "Underestimation is common. Humans have learned to survive by using what others ignore. It is our greatest advantage." Xylan studied him, the weight of realization settling in. "The marriage meant for diplomacy has become something more. You have not only secured peace, you have strengthened it through intelligence, patience, and ingenuity, and the galaxy will remember this." In the months that followed, humans and Virelians began to work together more closely than ever. Trading routes opened, joint projects flourished, and cultural exchanges revealed the depth of human creativity. Elia's influence extended far beyond the palace, shaping policies and inspiring both humans and Virelians to reach beyond what they had believed possible. The greatest change, however, was not in technology or strategy, it was in perception. Where Virelians had once seen humans as fragile and manageable, they now recognized them as equals, capable of leadership, insight, and courage. The marriage, intended as a diplomatic tool, had backfired in a most extraordinary way. It had revealed humanity's true power, not through violence, but through intellect, adaptability, and moral courage. As Elias and Xylan stood together on the highest balcony of the palace, watching Zyphra's twin moons cast silver light across the city, Xylan finally spoke words that carried both respect and awe. "You have changed everything, not by force, not by trickery, but by being human. That is a power we cannot ignore." Elias allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "That is all we ever need to do: observe, understand, adapt, and act. Humans survive, and in doing so, we shape the world around us." And in that moment, a quiet truth settled over the palace and beyond. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. Peace had been sought through marriage, but humanity's ingenuity had achieved far more than simple diplomacy. It had forged alliances, inspired change, and left a lasting mark on an alien civilization that had once believed it was beyond challenge. Elias Kane, a human among Virelians, had proven that strength was not measured by power alone. It was measured by wisdom, courage, creativity, and the unyielding drive to adapt. And the galaxy, finally, had to acknowledge that humans were a force unlike any other, unexpected, remarkable, and impossible to ignore. As the night deepened, the palace glowed softly in the moonlight. Humans and Virelians alike looked toward the future, no longer separated by assumptions, fear, or prejudice, but united by the undeniable fact that when humanity thrived, it changed everything. And Elias Kane, calm and observant as ever, stood at the center of it all, a quiet testament to the power of being human.